Those of us who have practiced the techniques of connecting with our higher self, with our blue sphere body, with light and sound technology techniques, have experienced this before. And the techniques teach us how to keep bringing more and more frequencies, higher and higher frequencies into our bodies, which makes the cellular structure of the body change, makes the DNA transform into a higher frequency, makes the whole sphere around the body transform the body into the light and sound of the higher frequencies around the body, and then the body folds into this sphere of light and disappears. This is what I saw take place before my eyes when my husband turned into light and disappeared. And the story took place in Monterey, and many of you have seen these pictures of me holding these spheres of light in my hand, and this violet sphere coming into my crystal heart and transforming my strings of my DNA into the violet string, which is what takes place when our DNA shifts. We flash into a flash of light and then return into a higher form of a blue body. And this is what I saw take place before my eyes in just a few seconds. I watched my husband flash into the sphere of light. He disappeared. I looked all over for him. I couldn't find him anywhere. And then when he reappeared in the living room, he was a different person. And when he reappeared, he wasn't in that body anymore. He had left, and his higher self had come into his body. So he was speaking to me through his higher self, his soul self, which would be all of his souls who had ever had lived within that soul perspective through millions of lifetimes before, and his highest self, Marcus, who had been communicating with him and guiding him through this process of ascension for many years before that time. Marcus appeared as my husband's body and started talking to me and saying Joe went through this process of ascension. He disappeared. His body came back, but he didn't come back. And he said Marcus told me that all of the angels in heaven couldn't get Joe to return to his body. So this is just one of the pieces of the puzzle that we need to learn about this ascension process. And this incident that happened with my husband has happened to other channelers before. People who are channeling entities that are their higher self or part of their soul family speaking through them. When a channeler allows another to speak through them, they have to actually leave their body. They actually leave their body through this sound tone in the midbrain. That buzzing sound connects to the violet brain at the lower part of the back skull. And that area we call the violet brain connects to the secondary consciousness. And the entity actually travels through that sphere, that silver cord or golden cord that it has been called, up to the secondary consciousness, the higher self that always waits 36 inches above our head. That higher self is in cosmic consciousness. The cosmic consciousness is one band of light and energy between the cosmic and the source frequency of the void, of the all antimatter of creation that has been created and hasn't been created. So that higher self is always up there at 36 inches above our head. And so Marcus had been speaking to Joe through that portal And Marcus was always around us, about 36 inches above, speaking to us and telling us about how we go through this ascension process. And when Joe turned into a flash of light and left, Marcus came down through that silver cord into Joe's body and began speaking to him. Now, this would be exactly like what happens when Jay-Z Knight leaves her body and Ramtha comes into her body and begins speaking. Ramtha is always 36 inches above Jay-Z Knight's head, but when he comes in, he sends Jay-Z Knight up that silver cord, up that violet string, up through the violet sphere, violet brain, up to the cosmos, and she goes off shopping in the cosmos and enjoying all the parallel spiritual adventures on the other side, while Ramtha comes down through that same cord of light and speaks to her. So Ramtha actually always stays 36 inches above her head because he's a higher dimensional frequency. So he's speaking through Jay-Z Knight's body through this neuronet, invisible neuronet energy. So this is what happened to Joe, my husband. This Marcus was speaking through Joe's body, but Joe wasn't there. Joe he turned into a ball of light which flashed his DNA into a higher frequency. He went up just as if he was going to change places with Marcus, but when he was doing that, he went on to the other side and he didn't come back. And the angels didn't know what happened to him, which is very strange because, all of the angels, all of the entities on the other side of the veil can all see and know each other, but they actually didn't know what happened to Joe. And the reason was this was a very special event that we were participating in. We had volunteered to come to Earth before we left the other side of the veil to be the ones who carried back to Source the demons, the fallen angelics, the ones who had forgotten who they were, who had forgotten that they were at once a spiritual body who came down to experience life forms in other dimensional realities and then got caught in these forms of light and energy called reverse spin technology that would shift them into these hibernization zones, which would lock them out of the source frequencies and place them in these matrices of non-reality where they were just being fed illusions of reality by fallen angelic entities and invader races who were trying to take over planet Earth for the past billion years. So this problem of all of these entities who had become demons and fallen angelics and locked within the phantom cores of the earth, locked in within these hibernization zones. They went within and they went into the density of earth. They needed to be unlocked from this matrix before the rest of this ascension plan could take place. So there were those who came to earth to solve this problem by arranging the transport of these demons to be removed from earth. So Marcus had told Joe that there were 3 demons who were hovering around him and were planning on possessing his body. But the Syrians and Elohim angels had a plan of using a body on earth to transport these demonic entities, and demonic entities represent an entire race line. So taking 3 demonic entities, we're taking 3 demonic race lines from the earth, their entire race line, meaning removing their ability to plug in their consciousness into ours any longer. And their lower frequency consciousness had been what was creating all of the confusion and war on Earth all of these years. And so this needed to be removed from Earth before the Earth could continue her ascension process, and we could, show people that they are all connected to their spiritual self on the other side. First, the demonic entities locked in the hibernization zones, who could not get set free through any desire of their own because their consciousness couldn't even understand the concept of reconnecting to source consciousness. So these entities needed help being removed from the earth, and this had never been done before. People had been possessed by demons before, and the angelics actually had no way of removing these demons from a person's body without the person actually going through death themselves to remove the demon. So the plan of the angels was to have these demons attached to the body of Joe, and he would have to die, leave his body to return to source, to take the demons, and then return back to his body. So the first half of the process happened. It worked. Joe's body turned into a ball of light. He was carrying the demons. He went to the other side, but they were not able to bring him back because his light was tied together with these demons' light. And this event had actually never taken place before anywhere in the universe, in any time dimension. It didn't exist. This formula that the Syrian Blue Maharaji were creating to remove the demons from Earth had never happened before. It was just an experiment. We were told that we were in an experiment. We were told that this Ascension Portal class that we were teaching was an experiential class, and we were in an experiment. We are in an experiment of seeing if there was a way of removing demons from Earth and then the person not dying afterwards. So we had gone half through this process. I watched Joe turn into a ball of light. He disappeared, and then the body returned. But when the body returned, the body was Marcus. Joe was not there anymore. Joe had gone to the other side of the veil. He had gone through the light. He had seen his Christ-light self. Except maybe it didn't happen quite that way, because he was carrying with him 3 demonic entities. And the way the law of creation works is when an entity becomes a demon, he can't actually return to source. And so the only way the demons could return to source is through the light of an angelic being. And so Joe's light had to be strong enough to turn into a ball of light and carry those demonic frequencies consciousness with him and go to the other side. But something happened on this way of getting to the other side because the angels couldn't find him. And so what Marcus said to me was, the only way we can get Joe to come back is you. So you are the only one that can do it. He said, we've had thousands and thousands of angels trying to find Joe and try to find him back, bring him back here. And they told me that the reason that I would be able to bring him back was because as long as my frequencies were on Earth, we were a cosmic flame, cosmic twins. We had come to Earth together. We were one being, one spiritual entity on the other side of the veil who split our frequencies up to come to Earth and then reunite after we came here. So both of our sets of frequencies were being used together. I was combining my frequencies with Joe's when he turned into a ball of light. So when he left, he contained his frequencies of consciousness and my frequencies of consciousness. And Marcus told me that that is the reason that I needed to stay on Earth, and I would be the one that could bring Joe back to his body. He said I was the only one that could do that. For the year before this happened, before Zorak, my starry brother from Sirius B, appeared and asked me to do this Ascension Portal project in Monterey, the Elohim angels had been training Joe and I to create the highest frequencies. And the highest frequencies are the consciousness of God, the highest frequencies of our spiritual self, creating those frequencies, recording them together. Those frequencies were the frequencies of our spiritual self on the other side of the veil. That is the spiritual self that you meet with when you walk down that hall of light and you come through this diamond door, and there's this big, beautiful, starry entity standing there that most people think is Jesus Christ. That is actually your Christ consciousness level spiritual self standing there waiting, glowing of light, waiting for you, because it's a reflection of you. It's a mirror image of you. It's who you really are at a higher consciousness level. So that higher self, that consciousness level of our spiritual self, we recorded onto these as our breaths of consciousness. We inhaled these breaths of consciousness from our higher self and recorded them. So the angels were teaching us how to do this. We had no idea why we were being taught how to do that until Joe had left his body, and they told me I needed those frequencies to get Joe to return back to his body. So Joe had disappeared, and then Marcus was there, and then there was like a little bit of Joe left within the DNA of the body, who was still trying to communicate with me even though Joe wasn't there, because his violet string consciousness was connected through his neuronet to his body, and he was gone from his body. He was still like flickering in and out with these messages that were sometimes Joe and sometimes Marcus. And when Joe would come into the body, he would be begging me to come with him. He wanted me to come up the silver cord and join him on the other side, and he would take hold of my hand and drag me with him, and he'd drag me along the beach running so fast I couldn't keep up with him, and he would say, come with me, you've got to come with me, or they're going to do to you what they did to me, and it's terrible, and you don't want to do this, and I need to get you out of here. I need to take you to where it is safe. And this entity that was talking to me scared me. I didn't want to be around this entity because I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know he meant he wanted to take me to the other side of the veil. I thought he meant he wanted to take me away because the demons were going to come after me too. But then I later learned that he had already carried the demons away, but he was still locked in this strange place, which was later what he told me, the story of where the story of Lucifer came, that these entities that had become demonic entities were like locked out of this light, and they were trying to return to source, and they couldn't find their pathway home. So Joe was going through this strange adventure. He was on the other side of the veil. He was in the mind of God, but there was something blocking his frequencies of knowing because he had carried these demons with him. So this adventure continued with Marcus communicating with me even after Joe left, and this Joe's body left. He drove away. I was afraid, and I left the apartment, and the being who was in Joe's body told me that I was in danger and that I should leave, and so I left the apartment and I checked into a hotel, and when I returned, the car was gone and the apartment was locked. And so I knew that the body had left, and I just thought this body was Joe and he was possessed, and I didn't know what was going on. And then he had been gone for 3 days, and then the angels told me that, and I didn't know where he was. I tried to locate where this body was taking him by calling the credit card company, telling the credit card company that I was trying to locate my husband and wanted to know where he had last used his credit card. And I found out that he had driven from Monterey to Bakersfield and then rented an airplane. He had a airplane with a pilot take him to Four Corners.